Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 28th, 2024. It has been 3,805 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea. 10 years and 129 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years, 4 months and 5 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Thursday and Friday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description and there are map updates. The Russia-Ukraine war report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands North, South and East of Ukraine, open source intelligence, Iron House team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. In our assessment, after almost 28 months of expanded war, the predictions that Russia would consume its Cold War reserve equipment are starting to become a reality. 2. We maintain Russia will continue to make tactical gains during its current offensive, but the lack of mobility, low morale, poor battlefield medicine and logistics issues make it unlikely that there will be significant breaches of existing Ukrainian defensive lines. 3. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. 4. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 5. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed over 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March 5th. 6. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 7. Autocrat Putin is continuing the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense led by the FSB since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 8. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Yesterday, Russian attacks targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure wounded at least 33 and killed 4. The city of Kharkiv was hit by 3 Fab 500 UMPK glide bombs, with 1 not exploding. Windows were blown out in 2 buildings at a university, and multiple homes were heavily damaged. The unexploded bomb, which was in a decrepit state, landed inside a home. We link to a video, and there is more information in the podcast description. 5 people were wounded. In the Kharkiv Oblast, the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, bombed the village of Maleva Sela, wounding 1 civilian. South of Kupiansk, Russian strikes on Kivsharivka, Glushkivka and Kurilivka wounded 1. In the Donetsk Oblast, Russian artillery shelling of Toretsk killed 1 person, and 2 women were injured in New York. The Phoenix Group evacuated 46 civilians from Toretsk, including 6 who were wounded. Civilian requests for evacuation have increased significantly due to the constant Russian attacks. Yasenova was also attacked, wounding 1 civilian, and Russia's shelling of the village of Hirnik wounded 1. The VKS bombed Selidova with a Fab 500 UMPK bomb, landing in the courtyard of an apartment building. 6 people were wounded, including 2 children aged 11 and 17. Kurakhova was attacked by Smerch rockets with cluster munitions, killing 2 and wounding 2 more. In the Kherson Oblast, Russia targeted civilian vehicles and ambulances with one-way drones in Novovorontsovka at least 3 times. One drone struck a small van, wounding a 62-year-old married couple. Both are in hospital with blast injuries and shrapnel wounds. A second strike hit an ambulance and a third attack hit another car, wounding the driver. Russian shelling of Kozatske wounded a 57-year-old man who suffered blast injuries and lost part of his hand. Overnight, shelling of Zolota Balka killed a 67-year-old man. During last night's drone and missile attack, debris fell on a road in the Mykolaiv Oblast, injuring a truck driver. A second driver was injured after getting into an accident while trying to avoid the falling debris. Russia continued to shell and use one-way drones to attack the Nikopol area in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Over 24 homes were damaged and 2 men were wounded, with one in hospital. Ukrainian energy company DTEK reported that it had lost 90% of its electrical generation capacity, and restoration will cost up to $445 million. Here is today's action report summary. On Wednesday, Russia carried out 148 assaults, and through Thursday evening, 119 attacks have been recorded. The 7-day moving average for daily assaults was 149, a small decrease. Despite holding a superior number of troops, Russia's combat potential continues to decline. Battlefield logistics are becoming increasingly strained due to a lack of mobility, Ukrainian interdiction of ground lines of communication, that's GLOC or supply lines, and the decreasing quality of heavy equipment sent to the forward lines. Due to the recent purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, decision-making for some commands has likely been gridlocked. Today's analysis is further in the podcast, but I do have an errors and omissions. When we shared our analysis of the incident on the occupied Sevastopol beach, we reported that the ATACMS rocket would have 950 M74 submunitions. That was inaccurate. For the rocket to have the range to reach Sevastopol, it would carry 300 submunitions. All other parts of our analysis, including only 10% of the bomblets landed in the area, mostly in the water, were accurate. We thank you for your understanding as we cut through the fog of war. Now let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Liptsi-Vovchansk area of operation, or AO. This is a good time to zoom into Vovchansk on the war map, where fighting continued. In the northwestern part of the settlement, Ukrainian forces advanced west to the post office on Korolenka Street. The distance between the eastern and western line of Russian troops in the central district is only 300 meters, with a significant force south of the post office still trying to break through to the machine aggregate plant. A second group of Russian troops is not surrounded, but they are at risk of encirclement and may be forced to abandon the Russian soldiers who have been stuck at the factory for 28 days. Ukrainian forces continued to push Russian forces back in Staritsa and remained on the offensive in Hlyboke. In Shebekino, in the Belgorod region of Russia, a Ukrainian drone struck an industrial facility, knocking out power. The Russian 83rd Airborne Assault Brigade is combat destroyed and has suffered a breakdown in the chain of command, forcing the Russian Ministry of Defense to withdraw the unit from the Liptsi-Vovchansk AO. Russian sources reported the unit has many refuseniks and deserters due to the heavy losses. They joined the 7th Motorized Rifle Regiment, which was withdrawn earlier in the month after becoming combat destroyed. When Chechen Akhmat blocking troops were deployed to Belgorod, Ukraine prioritized destroying their capabilities. This has increased the number of surrenders and desertions among Russian troops. Another growing challenge for Russian commanders is they did not plan to be in an intense fight for 6 weeks, straining basic supplies such as drinking water, rations, and medicine. Everything is going to plan. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces carried out 10 attacks, with fighting continuing near Sinkivka, northeast of Petropavlivka and east of Stepovanovo-Selivka. There was no change in the situation. In the Svatovo of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces continued their assaults east of Stelmachivka, Andriivka and Kopanke. In the Crimea, Ukrainian forces advanced up to 1500 meters east of Terny and Yampolivka. The advance happened almost 2 months ago, but it was requested to maintain operational security due to the spring ammunition shortages. The war map was updated. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Makiivka, Nevske and Torske were unsuccessful. In the Siverskoye of the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces continued to hold the eastern edge of the Chok Waste Terrakan southeast of Bilogorivka. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Lighter fighting continued in the Siverskoye of the Donetsk Oblast. Russian attempts to advance into Spirne and the direction of Vyemka ended in failure. Russian forces couldn't consolidate their gains in Rozdolivka due to the unfavorable terrain. We moved the line of conflict to the south of the village and coded the area as contested. Russian mail blogger 2 Majors confirmed the loss of control, reporting that fighting was ongoing in the village. In the Konstantinivka, significant fighting was contained to the canal district of Chasiv Yar, where the situation remains unchanged. Russian mail blogger Multik Sam reported a Russian advance south of Bogdanivka in an area we've coded as under Russian control for weeks. Based on the new intelligence, we moved the line of conflict to the eastern edge of the Dachas in the canal district. This does not represent a new Ukrainian advance. Russia launched at least 26 squad and platoon-sized assaults in the Toretsk-New York AO, where the situation was difficult. Fighting was ongoing near Druzhba, Zalizne, Pivdenne and east of New York. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, heavy fighting continued in the Avdiivka AO, with no new gains recorded. Russian forces continued their attacks on the western edge of Novoalexandrivka in the direction of Vozdvizhenka, Progress, Yevgenivka, Novoselivka Persha and the eastern edge of Sokil. Highlighting the decline of Russian equipment, a T-55 medium-duty tank was destroyed in Ocheretine, from Kyiv in 3 days to sending 65-year-old tanks to the front lines. Further south, Russian forces also attempted to advance west of Umanske, suffered losses and retreated to their previous defensive positions. Russian mercenary mail blogger reported fighting continued in Yasnobrodivka, and a geolocated video partially confirmed the report. Russian light infantry entering the eastern part of the village are targeted by drone-directed artillery and mortars and attacked by one-way drones. Russian troops check in, but they don't check out. Ukrainian and Russian sources reported fighting continued in the area of Karlivka, and War Gonzo reported fighting continued near Nevelske. Based on available intelligence, we moved the line of conflict to the first tree line south of the village and coded Nevelske from contested to under Ukrainian control. In the Vuhledar area, Russia carried out at least 20 assaults. Fighting continued in Krasnogorivka, on the eastern edge of Georgievka and in Paraskoviivka. Southwest of Novomikhailivka, we moved the line of conflict 1 tree line west, with Russian forces advancing closer to the T-532 highway, a critical geolog for Ukraine. We don't talk about Zaporizhzhia and Kherson much because the fighting has become mostly positional. I do have an update today. In the Orikhiv of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, positional fighting continued near Mala Tokmachka, northwest of Verbove and the southern edge of Robotine. The International Atomic Energy Agency provided an update on the status of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Director General Rafael Grossi reported that an off-site radiation monitoring station 16 kilometers south-southwest from ZNPP was destroyed by artillery shelling. Grossi did not clarify if the monitoring station was in Ukrainian or Russian-controlled territory, only stating, quote, the team was unable to access the location to confirm the damage. The IAEA expressed concern over available water to cool nuclear waste at the reactors due to summer weather and the loss of the Kakhovka reservoir. Grossi said, quote, "When the 6 reactors are shut down, the water from the wells is sufficient for cooling, but it remains a challenging situation that requires constant monitoring and assessment." Unquote. In the Kherson EU, Russia carried out 7 assaults in the area of Krinky, suffered losses and retreated to their defensive positions. In occupied Kherson Oblast, multiple Russian units are reporting that a typhoid and cholera outbreak among Russian troops started on June the 15th. Quote, "Personnel often collect water from wells in nearby settlements or springs, which leads to increased cases of typhoid fever and cholera. If comrades are identified with signs of illness or water poisoning, immediately evacuate them to a separate dugout, isolating them from other wounded and sick." Russian troops were given instructions on what water to drink and how to treat it with their limited resources. There are more details in the sitrap, and there is a link in the podcast description for more information. Moving to assessment. Vaccines for typhoid and cholera have been available for decades, and modern militaries typically vaccinate for these diseases during military induction. For healthy adults, cholera will only make you miserably sick, but treatment requires large amounts of fluid. Typhoid is 10 to 30% fatal without early intervention with antibiotics. Additionally, charcoal filters do not remove bacteria, so the AquaBreeze filters will not work. We've previously assessed the degraded state of Russian battlefield medicine. While the regular practice of separating soldiers infected with disease goes back to the 1700s, there was no guidance given to evacuate the sick for advanced treatment. But wait, there's more. Commenting on the guidance, Russian mail blogger 2 Majors wrote, quote, "In the conventional area, the situation is better. We travel and buy water at our own expense. Dropping water from a drone has already become part of the routine. I wouldn't have any complaints if we didn't have the same problem last year." Back to assessment. There were multiple reports of widespread cholera in occupied Kherson Oblast after the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, which the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russian state media and mail bloggers denied. 2 Majors also revealed that after the destruction of the dam and the loss of water from the North Crimean Canal, Russian troops are now forced to buy their own drinking water. With a long, hot summer ahead, the situation will only get worse. We have a lot of updates from the Black Sea region. The main Defense Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine, or GUR, hacked the payment, traffic control and customs computer systems at the Kerch Bridge, shutting down traffic for the 2nd day in a row. Hours after Russia restored the system, there were still 400 cars stuck in the security queue. At the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk, Russia, the new home of the Black Sea Fleet, analyst M.T. Anderson shared new satellite images showing their current deployments. With the small military port at capacity, Russia has berthed 1 Rapuha-class large landing ship, 1 Ivan Gren-class landing ship, and 2 Natya-class minesweepers at civilian docks. Russia withdrew from the port in occupied Sevastopol due to repeated uncrewed surface vessel and cruise missile attacks. It's been more than 10 months since Russia left the Black Sea Grain Initiative due to Ukrainian attacks on its navy, and Odesa ports are setting export records. Since the first vessels left under the hollow threat of a Russian blockade, 1,954 ships have been loaded carrying 55 million metric tons of cargo. Grains and edible oils have been shipped to 45 different countries. I'm going to say it again. Everything is going to plan.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
In the Tambov region of Russia, a Ukrainian drone struck the Transneft fuel depot in Podvorky Lavrovskie, sparking a fire. For those who are going to comment on our YouTube channel, fake news, propaganda, Regional Governor Maxim Yegorov confirmed the strike. Quote, "The fire has now been localized and is being extinguished by the oil depot's fire department, as well as 11 fire brigades that quickly arrived at the scene." In the Kursk region, rockets fired by HIMARS struck an abandoned school used as a barracks by Russian troops in Stropitse, wounding 5 Russian troops. Here is my Theaterwide update. Outgoing General Secretary of NATO Jens Stoltenberg said that Russia was no longer capable of achieving a, quote, significant breakthrough, even with the aid of Iran, North Korea and China. The US Department of State confirmed that an embassy employee was found dead in Kyiv. Spokesperson Matthew Miller told reporters, quote, "It is our understanding that he died of natural causes, and there is no sign of foul play." Russian Minister of Defense Andrei Belousov ordered the General Staff of the Russian Federation to provide proposals to, quote, deal with provocations by US strategic drones operating over the Black Sea. Belousov accused the US and the NATO alliance of, quote, increasing involvement and said that continued drone operations, quote, increases the risk of a direct confrontation between the alliance and the Russian Federation. This is coming from a country fielding Chinese ATVs and T-55 tanks, buying expired ammunition from North Korea, and being not able to provide clean drinking water to its troops. Pending approval of the European Parliament, Ursula von der Leyen will be the President of the European Commission for another 5 years, and the Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, will become the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy of the European Union. Former Prime Minister of Portugal, António Costa, has already been elected as the new President of the European Council and will take office on December 1st. In Brussels, Belgium, President Zelensky signed bilateral security agreements with the EU, Lithuania and Estonia. The details are in today's sitrep. The agreement has no end date and will remain in place as long as Kyiv maintains a path toward EU integration. The Financial Times reported that the US, Israel and Ukraine are in negotiations to transfer 8 Patriot batteries that Tel Aviv recently retired to Ukraine. The batteries were purchased in the 1990s and will require extensive upgrades and refurbishment. No government official would comment on the story, but it was reported that after Israel announced they would decommission the Patriot systems, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken started a dialogue. Serbian Prime Minister Miloš Vučević confirmed that his country has transferred weapons to Ukraine purchased by 30-party nations, and they will continue the practice. After the news broke, Russian propagandist Sergei Mardan called Serbia a whore state, declaring, quote, "The Serbs are no longer brothers to the Russians, but enemies." Mardan later apologized, saying that Russian and Serbian relations are strong and that common enemies triggered him to make a hasty statement. The Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic, Jana Černochova, confirmed that Ukraine had received the first 50,000 artillery shells out of 500,000, purchased by an 18-nation consortium. She added that Ukrainian forces will receive, quote, tens of thousands each month, and total delivery should happen by the end of the year. We're going to end the week in the land of Mobiks, Mobilization and Mir. The head of the Investigative Committee of Russia, Alexander Bastrykin, told reporters that 10,000 migrants who received Russian citizenship but never registered with the commissariat had been rounded up and sent to Ukraine. Quote, We have identified over 30,000 migrants who acquired citizenship but did not register for military service. We have registered them, and approximately 10,000 have been sent to the military operation zone. Move to Russia, they said. Get a Russian passport, they said. What could possibly go wrong? South Korean TV station Chosun reported that North Korea would be sending engineering troops to occupied Donetsk. Quote, Pyongyang can receive up to $115 million from the Russian Federation every year if it sends 3 to 4 engineering brigades to the parts of Donetsk region captured by the Russians. It remains unclear if engineering troops refer to construction, combat engineers, or explosive ordnance disposal teams. Our analysts remain skeptical. The U.S. ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, accused Beijing of siding with Russia in its war of aggression against Ukraine. He dismissed President Xi Jinping's claims of neutrality, adding, quote, We consider it a big mistake to allow Chinese companies to send thousands of components, technological components, microprocessors, and nitrocellulose to Russia to strengthen the defense industrial base of the Russian Federation. The Pentagon said it was able to block access to hundreds of illegally purchased Starlink internet terminals that Russian troops were using in the occupied territories. SpaceX is working with the Department of Defense to create a safe list of terminals that are used by the armed forces of Ukraine and block all others. Hundreds of Russian drone operators are not amused. Finally, the wife of our favorite FSB colonel, convicted war criminal, convicted Russian criminal and failed Mobik Igor Strelkov-Girkin, said that he was being transferred to a Russian penal colony from Lefortovo prison. Girkin's lawyer said the Federal Penitentiary Service would not reveal where he was going. On May the 15th, Girkin tried to be assigned to a Russian penal unit, with his request denied by a Moscow court. And that's what we know. I hope your weekend will not be haunted by nightmares about Russian Mir. Have a good rest and join me again on Monday. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.